In the early 19th century, before modern entertainment existed, people turned to the circus for excitement, amazement, and sometimes pure disbelief. Alongside powerful displays of strength, precise acrobatics, and exotic animal shows, one attraction always drew intense attention: the sideshow. This was where individuals with rare conditions or extraordinary traits appeared before the public. Often labeled as freaks, they defied rejection and embraced their identities. Today, we explore 15 remarkable figures whose lives continue to challenge what society considers normal. Let's start this countdown with 15. Priscilla Banales, the Monkey Girl. Priscilla Banales, born in Puerto Rico in 1911, became known across the circus world as the Monkey Girl. She was born with hypertrichosis, a rare condition that caused thick hair to grow over her entire face and body. What many viewed as a hardship became her path into the spotlight. She joined sideshows while still young, performing across the country. Her appearance drew attention, but her warmth left a deeper impression. She later met Emmett Bejano, a performer with a rare skin disorder known as the alligator-skinned man. Together, they traveled as the world's strangest married couple. Their partnership was more than a headline. It was built on trust, understanding, and pride in who they were. Priscilla refused to be treated as a curiosity. Her life wasn't shaped by mockery or spectacle, but by her ability to create love and purpose in a world that didn't always make space for either. She didn't just perform, she endured, and she chose joy. 14. Johnny-Ek, the amazing half-boy. Johnny-Ek, born in 1911, lived with sacral agenesis, a condition that left his lower body underdeveloped. In the sideshow world, he was known as the half-boy, but there was never anything incomplete about him. From early on, he was skilled in art, music, carpentry, photography, and illusion. He even built miniature furniture and operated his own penny arcade. What set Johnny apart wasn't his condition. It was his precision, creativity, and complete refusal to be pitied. He starred in the cult film Freaks and appeared in several Tarzan movies, but the spotlight never owned him. His most iconic act involved a stage illusion where it seemed he was sliced in half, performed alongside his twin brother. Johnny never sought sympathy, he demanded respect and earned it. Through a life surrounded by spectacle, he kept a quiet confidence. Not because he lacked anything, but because he understood who he was and never let the world shrink that truth. 13. Grace McDaniels, the mule-faced woman. Grace McDaniels was born in Iowa in 1888 with Sturge-Weber syndrome, a condition that distorted the shape of her face. Over time, it led to the name mule-faced woman, a label given by a world more curious than kind. But those who knew her didn't see cruelty or shame. They saw someone who carried herself with quiet dignity. She entered the sideshow circuit in the early 1900s, not chasing attention, but carving out a living. Grace supported her son through her work and became a familiar name on the traveling show scene. Audiences came for the spectacle but stayed for something they hadn't expected: grace, loyalty, and strength that needed no defense. She never asked to be seen as inspirational. She simply lived on her terms and showed that dignity wasn't tied to appearance. In a world that tried to reduce her to a headline, she reminded everyone that kindness, courage, and love cannot be measured by a face. 12. Ella Harper, the Camel Girl. Ella Harper was born in Tennessee in 1870 with a condition called genu recurvatum, which caused her knees to bend backward. Because of this, she walked more easily on all fours, which led to her being known as the Camel Girl. She joined W.H. Harris's nickel plate circus in the 1880s and quickly drew public fascination. Her movements may have seemed strange, but Ella never played into the spectacle. She was thoughtful, reserved, and used her time in the circus to build something bigger. After just a few seasons performing, she left the show and turned toward education. Her story isn't about shock or novelty. It's about knowing what you want, even when the world sees you differently. Ella refused to be boxed in by expectation or labeled by her condition. Her departure from circus life wasn't dramatic. It was deliberate. She didn't let others define her path. She quietly wrote her own ending, one that few ever expected. 11. Stefan Bobrowski, Lionel the Lion-Faced Man. Stefan Bobrowski, born in 1891 in Poland, had hypertrichosis, a condition that caused long, thick hair to cover his face and body. The world knew him as Lionel the Lion-Faced Man, but behind the stage name was someone deeply thoughtful, fluent in 5 languages and known for his calm demeanor. He began performing across Europe, eventually reaching American audiences through the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey. Audiences often arrived expecting something wild or strange, but Lionel never played to that. He spoke clearly, answered questions patiently, and carried himself with dignity. His looks gave him work, but his intelligence gave him presence. He didn't ask to be accepted, he expected it. His life didn't revolve around trying to fit in or prove anything. He simply showed up, fully himself, and let people confront their assumptions. Lionel's legacy isn't about the hair, it's about the man behind it, who refused to be anything less than whole. 10. Millie and Christine McCoy, the two-headed nightingale. Born into slavery in North Carolina in 1851, conjoined twins Millie and Christine McCoy became known as the two-headed nightingale. Sharing one body but 2 minds, their lives were shaped not just by their condition, but by their talent. Discovered in early childhood, they were exhibited across America and Europe, where audiences were captivated not by their form, but their voices. They sang in harmony, played instruments, spoke multiple languages, and carried themselves with grace. Once freed, they took charge of their careers and no longer let others control their image. Despite the era's appetite for spectacle, they moved through it as performers, not exhibits. The circus gave them a stage, but it was their presence that held it. They never asked for sympathy, they earned respect. Millie and Christine lived with dignity, worked with intention, and reminded the world that difference doesn't erase excellence. In a business built on deformity, they left behind something rare, admiration without apology. 9. Prince Randian, the human caterpillar. Prince Randian was born in 1871 in British Guiana, without arms or legs, a result of tetra amelia syndrome. What many would see as a limitation, he reshaped into mastery. Known as the human caterpillar, Randian stunned crowds with his skill, rolling cigarettes, opening boxes, writing and shaving using only his mouth and shoulders. He joined P.T. Barnum's Circus in the United States and quickly became one of its most well-known performers. Audiences arrived expecting helplessness. They witnessed precision. But off-stage, Randian lived a full life, married, independent, and quietly self-assured. He wasn't a man shaped by pity or spectacle. He shaped how the world saw him. In an industry that often reduced people to labels, he moved past the surface and left a lasting impact through quiet control. His name may have drawn the crowd, but it was his ability that silenced them. Randian didn't prove himself through speeches or protest. He did it with work no one thought possible, and he did it flawlessly. 8. Joseph Merrick, the Elephant Man. Joseph Merrick was born in England in 1862 and lived with a condition that deformed his body beyond recognition. Labeled the Elephant Man, he was pushed into sideshows, displayed as something to stare at. But Joseph was no creature. He read poetry, wrote letters, and spoke with a gentleness few expected. Exhibited throughout Britain, his life changed when Dr. Frederick Trevis gave him care at London Hospital. There, for the first time, he was treated not as an object, but as a man. His visitors met someone thoughtful and deeply aware, someone who understood what it meant to be watched, yet still stood with dignity. His body drew attention, but his mind held it. Joseph never sought to change how he looked. He simply asked to be seen for who he was. In a time when people like him were hidden or mocked, he faced the world fully exposed and remained kind. His legacy is simple and human. Respect, no matter the form. 7. Isaac Sprague, the living skeleton. Isaac W. Sprague was born in 1841 and developed normally until his teens. Then his body began to fade. Though he ate well, he lost weight rapidly. By adulthood, he weighed just over 40 pounds. His condition had no name, no explanation, but it gave him a role. Joining P.T. Barnum's American Museum, he became known as the living skeleton. On stage, his fragile frame shocked audiences. But behind the curtain, Isaac was calm, clever, and deeply human. He married, raised children, and lived not as a symbol, but as a man doing what he could with what he had. He never exaggerated, never performed tricks. He simply stood in his truth. His body may have seemed empty, but his presence was full. Isaac didn't chase applause or pity. He worked, endured, and lived with quiet strength. In a world that often reduced people to their outlines, he reminded them, even the thinnest frame can carry an unshakable soul. 6. Fedor Jeftichuk. Jojo the dog-faced boy. Fedor Jeftichuk was born in Russia in 1868 with hypertrichosis, a condition that caused thick hair to grow across his face and body. Early in life, he was exhibited alongside his father, who shared the same condition. After his father's death, Fedor continued alone. P.T. Barnum brought him to America and gave him a role, Jojo the dog-faced boy. Posters claimed he was wild, raised by animals, untamable. On stage, he growled and barked. Off stage, he was soft-spoken, fluent in several languages and widely respected. He knew what the crowds wanted, but he never confused it with who he was. The circus sold him as a legend, but he lived as a man. He never escaped the role, but he carried it with quiet control. Fedor's story isn't just about appearance. It's about what the world demands and what a person chooses to give. He gave them the act, kept the truth, and left behind more than a myth, a life that outlived the costume. 5. Charles Stratton, General Tom Thumb. Charles Stratton, born in 1838, became world famous as General Tom Thumb, one of P.T. Barnum's most celebrated attractions. Born with dwarfism, Stratton reached just over 3 feet in adulthood, yet held command over stages around the world. Barnum discovered him at age 5 and helped shape a career that spanned continents. Stratton performed for royalty, toured internationally, and became a fixture of 19th century entertainment. His size may have drawn attention, but it was his charm, wit, and confidence that made him a star. He later married Lavinia Warren, a fellow little person and performer, in a wedding so widely publicized it captured the imagination of millions. Though marketed for his stature, Charles built a life filled with respect and recognition. In a time when many were mocked for their differences, he stood center stage by choice. Not as a joke, but as a professional. He left behind more than applause. He left a name tied to grace, skill, courage, and self-possession. 4. Annie Jones, the bearded lady. Annie Jones was born in Virginia in 1865 and grew a full beard by age 5 due to hypertrichosis. What might have made her an outsider became the beginning of her career. Discovered by P.T. Barnum, Annie joined his traveling circus and quickly became one of its most recognizable performers. Though her beard drew stares, she carried herself with refinement and confidence. She played music, spoke clearly, and held conversations that surprised those expecting a sideshow oddity. Over time, she used her platform to speak up for performers with physical differences, challenging how the public viewed them. She refused to be reduced to a label and actively worked to shift how people with unique traits were treated. Her story isn't just about being seen, it's about being heard. Annie stood not only for herself, but for others often denied dignity. In the center of the spotlight, she kept her identity intact and proved presence isn't about appearance, it's about self-worth. 3. Fannie Mills, the Ohio Bigfoot Girl. Fannie Mills, born in 1860, became known as the Ohio Bigfoot Girl because of Milroy's disease, a rare disorder that caused extreme swelling in her legs and feet. Her shoes measured 19 inches, specially crafted to fit limbs that made movement difficult. Yet Fannie didn't withdraw. She stepped into the circus world and found her place. She toured across the country, standing before curious audiences, not as an object, but as a woman with humor, wit, and sharp awareness. People came expecting to see something strange, but they remembered her for the way she carried herself. Her voice, her jokes, her ease in the spotlight, all of it redefined what audiences thought they'd see. Fannie never asked to be pitied. She showed that confidence doesn't require symmetry, and grace doesn't depend on perfection. Her story was never about size. It was about the spirit that filled the room. She left behind a name, not for deformity, but for a personality that never wavered. 2. Schlitzie. The pinhead Schlitzie was born in 1901 with microcephaly, a condition that affected both his physical development and cognitive abilities. Known on stage as the Pinhead, he performed in circuses and sideshows for decades, often dressed in bright gowns with a grin that audiences never forgot. Though many viewed him as a curiosity, those who worked with Schlitzie saw a joyful, affectionate, and eager to connect person. He didn't speak in full sentences, but his presence said enough. He became widely known after his role in the 1932 film Freaks, where his image endured far beyond the screen. Life outside the show wasn't always kind, but within the circus, he was protected, appreciated, and loved. His caretakers understood him as more than a performer. He was part of their family. Schlitzie's story wasn't about pity, it was about acceptance. He reminded people that warmth isn't measured in words, and happiness doesn't require understanding. He lived without pretense, and in that, there was real beauty. 1. Chiang and Eng Bunker, the Siamese twins. Chiang and Eng Bunker were born in 1811 in Siam, now Thailand, conjoined at the chest by a band of cartilage. Their condition made them a global phenomenon, and the term Siamese twins has followed them ever since. Brought to the West as young men, and they were exhibited across Europe and America. But beyond the stage, they built real lives. The brothers eventually settled in North Carolina, married 2 sisters, and together raised 21 children. They bought land, managed their affairs, and became U.S. citizens. Though they spent years as part of the circus, they never lived in its shadow. Their story wasn't one of limitation, it was one of navigation. They faced mockery, fascination, and isolation, yet refused to be reduced to a condition. In the end, what people remembered wasn't how they were joined, it was how they endured. Chang and Eng weren't bound by spectacle. They lived with purpose, and their legacy is one of quiet power, built on resilience. We hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe. We'll catch you later.